All right, so as I mentioned, my name is Caitlin Sprout, and I will be hosting this session, the Virtual Learning Community Model Pilot, an equity-driven approach to open access success. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Microphones will be muted for this presentation, but we highly encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat. Also, we have enabled live transcription. If you would like to use it, click the live transcription button at the bottom of your Zoom window. I'm pleased to introduce you to the panelists for this session. Dr. Yvonne Lozano is the Assistant Dean for the Department of Health Sciences within the College of Arts and Sciences at UAGC. Dr. Barb Zorn Arnold is the Assistant Vice President of Graduate Studies and Professional Accreditation at UAGC. Dr. Christy McMahon is the Program Chair for the BA Healthcare Administration Program, and Dr. William Ballard is a full-time faculty member for the BA Healthcare Administration Program at UAGC. Now, I would like to turn it over to our panelists to discuss virtual learning communities.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Next slide there for us, Kingsley. This is quite a story to tell. It's a little bit of a long story, but we won't, keep you here with all the details. But I do think it's important as we progress through the presentation and as in the theme of this year's TLC, to talk a little bit about the virtual learning community and how we've aligned that with an open access admissions opportunities, and also addressing some of the challenge that we see with open access students. So there are, as we all know, several challenges with open access students. I don't think anybody would be surprised with that. Several challenges that not only we have with open access, but really even in traditional universities where there is admission criteria. There's always all types of challenges. But one thing we want to do is that we want to ensure students who may not have had an opportunity to go to college, to go to university, to be able to come and to achieve their academic goals. And then also there's managing some of the levels of preparedness that we see with students, some of the daily life challenges. There's just a diverse group of students that we see from all levels of education, that come with all types of backgrounds, that come with all types of different types of life challenges that they bring to the table as well. And of course, last but not least, are the financial barriers, and that we all know that the students are experiencing. And as we progress through this and starting to plan the pilot, started to think about the course in which we were going to focus this pilot on, these are some of the things that we began to think about. Next slide, please. So one of the first considerations when you're thinking about your classroom and you're thinking about how to maybe in development or maybe a change that you need to make or revision, or you're thinking about students, or you understand the demographic of your students, it's very important in thinking about your programs, thinking about what type of students that you have, what do those demographics look like to you, and what do you know about your students? And hopefully once you enter into a classroom, the faculty member becomes more aware of some of the needs that the student has, whether it's educational needs, whether it's learning needs, or whether it's particularly other life skill issues or life challenges that they have. So we know that it ensures that everybody, regardless of their background or circumstances, will have an equal opportunity. These are things to consider. The next slide, next one, please. And also promote inclusivity and create an environment. So a lot of times when people think of inclusivity, you might just be thinking of people from different diverse ethnic backgrounds or racial backgrounds, but it's also has to do with students' learning abilities and where they are coming from in their life challenges, and how can you create a classroom environment in which they're going to be able to thrive. But the environment doesn't just start with the classroom. We all know that it starts with the university as a whole. From the minute that the student is talking to admissions advisor and enrollment advisor until they graduate, that environment consistently has to be a place in which they believe they are thriving. Now, we might think that they're thriving, but we also want to make sure that the student, more importantly, feels that they have everything they need and are for the most part. Obviously, we're not going to give everybody everything that they need. Next point, please. So, and again, in thinking about this classroom and the development of health and wellness, and also thinking about the virtual learning community, we looking at targeted interventions. And this is really, as I kind of reviewed this over the last couple of days, I recognize that the target interventions, thinking about not only some of the backgrounds that we've talked about with students, but also being able to accommodate that and the changing level of learning capabilities or educational backgrounds that we see for every student that comes into our classes. It's not going to be the same for every class. You have those classrooms in which students are really thrive on their own. They have a certain level of autonomy. They're hunger for learning. They're hungry for learning, and it's easy for them to move on. But we also wanted to look at some of the systemic barriers that are faced at times by marginalized student populations. And so we'll talk about that as we move through the development of the course. Next point, please. We also want to make sure that, as we do at UAGC, and every class has the ability, and every class is already designed with support services that we offer, not only within our programs or departments, but also within the university as a whole, looking at both academic, financial, and personal challenges. And we all know why it's important to kind of have that one-stop shopping view when they go into a classroom, to somewhere that they can just kind of hit a link to take them to a place in which they can get the help or answer the questions that they need to have answered. I think there's one more on there. There you go. That was it. Okay, next slide, please.
Thank you, Dr. Lozano. And you know what? I think it's time for a quiz, because what would a presentation be without a quiz? So Kingsley, would you kindly bring up the poll for our audience? And we're asking you this quiz question, which is related to community college students, because that is our focal population. So community college students, the primary reason why fewer than X% of all community college students complete their bachelor's degree, even though X% of these students state it is their goal. So let's see. So far 5% of our participants answered. We'll give it a few more seconds, because we really want to capture the audience opinion and perception. Oh, got a couple more answers.
Looks like they're saying that the poll disappeared, Barb.
Oh, Kingsley? I'm going to ask Kingsley to launch it again. Ah, there we go. It's so nice to have competent TLC support. Really appreciate our support today, our tech support. All right, looks like we have a majority. If you want to share the results. So it appears that most of you chose correctly. 80% of community college students want to have a bachelor's degree, yet fewer than 15 actually attain that goal. So this is really startling. And as a matter of fact, only 20% of students in community colleges actually transfer over into four-year institutions. And their primary barrier is because they are not fully aware of the services that their community colleges provide, nor how they should transfer into a four-year university. And this is where UAGC shines. This is one of, I think, one of our greatest open access strengths. Our ability to quickly, efficiently, and generously bring in transfer credits and onboard students, distinguishes us in the marketplace. Well, with first-generation students, we know that there are barriers, and this has been documented by our institution, other institutions, as well as national data. And those 5 barriers are health, finances, academic preparedness, a sense of belonging. That's the emotional, social, psychological support. And that can be difficult to really achieve in an online environment. And then navigation of university services. Students are not aware of all of the services that a university provides. And our pilot in particular reviews HWE 200 course with a virtual learning community in there to help those students chip away at these 5 barriers. And these are students from that represent 150 different colleges, universities, including military schools, as well as our community college partners. Of particular interest is the Ultimate Medical Academy, the UMA. And I will turn it over to Dr. Lozano to share more about that.
Thank you, Dr. Zorn. So here's where our story begins, to the point where we're at today, and having completed a pilot study with the HWE, which is a health and wellness course. When I say HWE 200, it's health and wellness course, Introduction to Health and Wellness. And Dr. McMahon will be talking about that course more specifically a little bit later. Ultimate Medical Academy is a 2-year health science and health and human service college located in Florida. They are partnered with UAGC as well as other universities. And in that partnership, many of the students are often choose to attend UAGC, particularly the Department of Health and Sciences, the health sciences programs, as well as the Health and Human Services psychology program. But particularly, most of these students are in the health sciences, which is particularly health and information management, and in some healthcare administration. We see a lot of those students. Well, when these students enter, a lot of these students have not completed all of their gen ed courses, and we heard from their vice president of enrollment that shared with us they wanted to meet with our university, particularly with the department, and started to tell us that there had been some issues with a lot of their students that were dropping out by their 3rd or 4th course, and they were concerned about that. Well, to learn a little bit about them and their students, it's a nonprofit, as you see here, healthcare educational institution. It's both online and in campus, and a lot of the students that we are getting were from online particularly. So they transferred to UAGC to get a 4-year degree. One of the most important things I learned about the UMA when I started to meet with their faculty and staff was that they had a strongly connected support system from the very point that their students started at UMA until the day that they graduated. So these students have been very close to each one, many different individuals there, however, are used to being guided very closely and consistently throughout their academic experience at UMA. So with that said, when they came into UAGC, there was this was just an assumption, this kind of sense of loss and kind of sense of belonging, leaving something that they felt very strongly they belonged to, and moving into a university in which they couldn't really quite find those connections. And so, as most of us know, one of the things that we wanted to have happen, because they were dropping these courses to 4th or 5th, was maybe we could maybe we could add a course that was health related earlier on in their initial academic career, which was to try to add that to the 3rd course, to the 3rd course that they take. And so that was our plan, and that's what UMA was very happy with that, felt, and from comments that they were getting from students, this whole kind of sense of not feeling like they belong, not finding something that they could relate to, getting out of kind of those focused healthcare courses that they were taking. And so we moved from there. Next slide, please. So, this is another long story within itself. And anybody that knows anything about any conversation I've had regarding the learning community, it's been going on for quite a while. When we were the College of Health and Human Services, we developed online communities for our health courses. Our Masters in Public Health and some other courses really focused on developing the learning community, which included each of the programs within Department of Health Sciences. So each program chair, each faculty were responsible for providing content for the learning community, and the learning, we had, it was decided that the learning community would be used in a way in which the student could access it. But it wasn't really called a virtual learning community. As you know, there is a learning community, a lot of that you see at brick and mortars. But in this, as we began to prepare this and process this, we recognized that this was going to be virtual, which was not going to really fall within some of the guidelines that were specifically for an in-classroom learning community. So how are you going to do this virtually? It was a lot of discussion, a lot of back and forth at how this was going to occur. We also recognized that not only did this need to be a learning environment, but we needed to get students interested excited about the program that they had chosen, something that there was going to be with them for the rest of their career, something to excite them about that. But also we wanted to design it and to improve it so that it could be a way to improve student persistence. And let me give you a small example of that, of how that would happen. When those of you who went to college, when you went to a college, you were brick and mortar, I can speak for myself. Going to a brick and mortar, the first thing you do is you try to find those connections, either with individuals, either in friendships, but you mostly get excited about the degree that you've chosen. So let's say that you're a nursing major or you're an engineering major, and you go to those buildings where the engineering department is or where the nursing program is, and you start to meet faculty and you see other students, and you see that other people are successful and they're excited about what they're doing. And then all of a sudden you get into a course you get into courses that's not really what your major is, because that's coming later and everyone recognized that. But you still have that strong sense of connection because you're there with individuals in person. So how do we create that sense of belonging through the virtual learning community? Maybe, at this point, these are kind of some of the things we were thinking about. How can we make them feel like excited about the degree that they've chosen? And that's what this learning community focused on. But there was something missing, and we're going to get to that. So it promoted the student persistence. We also recognized that maybe we needed to look at other things that would connect the student, not necessarily directly to the virtual learning community alone, but maybe we could also complement this and align this with the classroom, looking at things like wellness and belonging and metacognition and life skills. And these are kind of the things that we're going to help the students with diverse experiences in the classroom and beyond. What I mentioned at the beginning in the first slide in looking at open access, we recognized that these were all categories in which we needed to address for the student. Next slide, please. So we started to think about what the model now would look like. Number one, what are the characteristics of that model? And I've talked about some of that, looking at something that was equity-focused approach. And a lot of times people only see equity when they're thinking, let's say, of a person of color. But equity really lies within many different diverse backgrounds, maybe students who are coming through poverty, students who are experiencing homelessness, students who are experiencing life-changing events, whether no matter what it might be, physically, emotionally, spiritually, whatever, financially. All of those things were things that stop the students sometime from continuing to achieve their academic goals. And at UAGC, one of the reasons I've been here the years I've been is because UAGC focuses on those things, focusing on those categories I've mentioned. But now what we're trying to do is to take those categories and implement them in an environment in which they can create and have a sense of what that means. We looked at we tailored it for an open access university. I've already discussed that. We looked at the 5 wellness factors that are often associated with low retention. What were some of those? And they are what I mentioned here, all of those that you see, the financial, the physical, psychological, spiritual, and metacognitive wellness. All of those things were factors that contribute to low wellness. All of the issues related to that were factors. And so we decided to create a pilot program and create a course, and Dr. McMahon will talk about that just a little bit. 1 year of course data, and as we move ahead in this presentation will be presented. And so we're excited to mention that. We looked at student course outcomes, progression percentage, and student surveys as well. Next slide, please. So this is just kind of looking at the layers of student wellness. It's really difficult to just focus on one part of these layers of wellness, where you're just looking at social and cultural wellness or financial wellness, emotional and spiritual wellness. Also recognizing with the social and cultural wellness that all the things that are going on in our environment, in our society, that impact individual lives, that impact family lives, that impact groups of individuals, and how important it is to be able to mention that and to be able to talk about that. And we'll talk about some of these specific layers of wellness and how they were implemented into the design of the health and wellness course. I believe Dr. Zorn, I think you're next. Next slide. Yes, here's the pilot objective.
Excellent, thank you. And yes, our objective here is to really ensure that the students are able to use that VLC, that dashboard, to access all of the university's resources, as well as each of these 5 layers, these 5 factors associated with a high student drop rate. So we created a social cognitive learning environment and that sense of belonging. And I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Christy McMahon to walk us through how that VLC is implemented into the classroom, as well as to watch a video thereafter, so that everyone can have an experience to see what it looks like.
Thank you, Dr. Zorn. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about how we actually integrated the virtual learning community within the class. So right away in week 1, students are introduced to the virtual learning community. Within the introduction discussion, we ask them to go into the virtual learning community and take a look at their different programs. And as Dr. Lozano mentioned, it's kind of looking at going into each of your buildings and learning more about health administration or nursing and all the different programs that we offer. So they go in there and they kind of peruse around to see the different types of programs. We also have a couple emphases in there that they can look at, as well as different areas of wellness. But we don't get into the different areas of wellness until a little bit later in the class. So in the very first week, they can feel that social engagement and to be supported right away when they get started in the classroom. So after they look into the virtual learning community, they come back into the classroom and they post their introduction and they talk about what they learned about their program. And then they also pose a question to their classmates. So that kind of helps to get the discussion going. It helps them to feel included and engaged right off the bat in week 1. And then following week 1, each week students are referred back to the virtual learning community within each assignment. So for example, in week 2, students are asked to complete a physical fitness assessment. So they complete that and then they write up a journal, and then they have to go back to the virtual learning community and they can learn more about physical health. That could be anything from the health risk of not being physically healthy, the health benefits of being physically healthy, some time management tips on how to include exercise into your day. And then so they can go back into there and look at some different areas and find maybe 1 or 2 tips or tricks that they want to implement into their own life, and then bring that back to the journal and write a way or an action plan of how they plan on using that information. And then so the class is 5 weeks long. So each week they will do that. And then in the final week, in week 5, students, they develop an actual personal wellness plan. And that's an assignment that includes kind of a culmination of the entire class. We talk about all of those different 5 key areas of wellness, and students get to choose one area of wellness to focus on to improve. So they talk about that and develop a presentation, and they talk about, again, the health risks and the benefits of addressing these areas. They talk about barriers and how to get around that. And then again, they use that virtual learning community to find some tips and tricks to use to support them in that way as well. So again, it is integrated throughout the entire class, and it really is very supportive for our students. So next slide, please. And here we're going to show a video on how our designer actually created the virtual learning community, and it will take you through a step-by-step process on how that was completed.
One note, if I may add, Dr. McMahon, before we move into this, is that the virtual learning community complements the classroom as well, and vice versa, because the classroom is focused on wellness. Some of those some of those categories we mentioned early on, but it also moves its way into the virtual learning community as well. And this slide that was created by Dr. Ballard will help explain that.
To access the virtual learning community, students participate in weekly assignments that link them to this valuable resource throughout the course. For instance, here is Week 1 discussion inside HWE 200, where students get the chance to introduce themselves. In the discussion prompt, we provide a direct hyperlink to the virtual learning community, guiding students to explore the resource before joining the weekly discussion. During this discussion, students are encouraged to dive deeper into their chosen major or emphasis, sharing any new insights or discoveries they have made about their degree focus after reviewing the virtual learning community. As you enter the virtual learning community, you will find the homepage where students can access information about the various degrees and emphasis offered by the Department of Health Sciences. For the assigned discussion, students are asked to select at least one degree or emphasis to explore, which they can afterwards discuss within the class during the weekly discussion. Let's say a student decides to learn more about the health and wellness emphasis. When this option is selected, an assortment of resources that are specific to this emphasis are offered to the student. Some include resources on career opportunities, professional organizations, and current news. If at any point students wish to explore another major or emphasis, they can easily return to the home page. Once they've gathered the necessary information, students can then easily transition back to the weekly discussion inside the course to complete their assignment. In another course assignment, students are tasked with submitting a journal entry. Within this assignment, they are prompted to reflect on the various dimensions of wellness and identify areas in which they might need improvement. Students are then directed to the virtual learning community, where they can explore each well-being dimension, each of which offers valuable information and resources. For demonstration, if a student identifies a need for additional support in the scope of financial wellness, they can readily select this option to access a collection of helpful materials, including informative videos and articles. Furthermore, students are directed to and encouraged throughout the virtual learning community to explore the array of services and support offered by the university. These encompass a range of areas. Some include access and wellness, tutoring services, career services, advising, and assistance with maintaining a healthy school-life balance. After reviewing this information, students can seamlessly return to their course assignment and incorporate their findings into their journal submission. In summary, the virtual learning community stands as a valuable asset, enhancing the educational experience for students as they journey through their respective courses. It serves not only as a key educational component for various programs, but also as a resource center covering academics, professional development, and personal well-being. In addition, it provides continuous support, ensuring students have access to valuable guidance and resources both within the university and in the real world.
Next slide, please. Thank you. So now we're going to get to the meat of it. How did the students fare in terms of their course metrics in HWE 200 before the VLC and after the VLC? And we have a full year of data to present. The population size was about 300, and before you see the sample, the course sections were 27 as compared to 30 with the VLC. First couple of things I'd really like for you to see is that the drop percentage with the VLC is 1% lower than prior to it. We also see that the failure percentage is the same, so really no difference in that area. The progression percentage, prior to incorporating the VLC into the classroom, 79% of the students progressed into their next course. With the VLC, it jumped up to 83%. That's a 4% increase, which is meaningful for a single course, but across time and across many courses, it is highly significant. And given the skills that the students are learning there, it can actually compound the benefits. But the one thing I'd like for you to notice here is that in the progressive, the standard deviation is quite high. So prior to the VLC, it's 15%, give or take. And after, it's lower, it's 9%, give or take, but that is still significantly, that's pretty high. So it really warrants a deeper look into the data. And then you'll see in this case, the GPA across, in comparison, doesn't seem to be much difference. But keep in mind, this data was collected, it's averaged by class and then averaged over the year. Next slide. So looking deeper into this group of students. So here we have the course metrics grouped by the student transfers, as well as our partnerships. So the first four you'll see is Dallas College, Maricopa Community College, the M0 Drone Group, and the Ultimate Medical Academy, which was our original focus for the study. And then the other transfers include students from 150 different colleges and universities. And in some cases, these students come in, they take one class to fulfill their gen ed credit, and then they transfer back to their graduating institution. So what we see here is that almost all students had higher course grades in HWE 200 than they did in their previous course, the GPA that they had prior to coming in, except for the Ultimate Medical Academy group, our focus. So their GPA actually ended up being lower. So we have to ask ourselves why. So within that data set, there were 5 outliers. We had 5 students that failed the course, and that really threw the data set. If we remove those outliers, then those students, their GPA jumped up to close to 3.0. Course completion was very high, and the next course progression was also quite high. The next course progression in the previous slide you saw was a bit lower than that, and the reason is because we had students that graduated within that time frame. So we have upper division students taking these courses. And once I remove those students that graduated, because of course they can't have a next course progression, the percentages really jumped up. Next slide, please. So as I said, we have experienced students in here. So we really wanted to see, how do these students fare? We'll see that the UMA, this is the 3rd course in their sequence, so their GPA is lower. But the more courses students take, the higher their GPAs, as well as their gains. So this really tells us that the students are becoming better students with additional courses. So the more practice they have, the better they get, with the exception of this last group. And I'm not sure what's happening there. It may be that they're at the end of the journey and a bit worn out. And I don't know what their academic record is, which could be influenced. But I'd like to hand it over to Dr. Christy McMahon right now to share the student response, because this is really the gem of our research.
Thank you, Dr. Zorn. So within the actual class, we wanted to learn more about if our students even liked having this virtual learning community. So we implemented a survey here just to kind of gather some information on the student experience and how they felt about it. So on this slide, you can tell that program overview was the most commonly selected area from the virtual learning community that the students enjoyed learning about and found most interesting, followed then by their career and events and activities and professional organizations. And you can see the other areas that were implemented. So just like we suspected, students really do want to learn more about their program overview and what they can do with these degrees that they're earning. So next slide, please. And then the next question that we asked them is, what assignments did they enjoy? Which ones did they find most helpful to your success within the program? And so for the very first week, they really enjoyed learning about the different areas of wellness. So we had 43 that selected the first week of class, followed then by the 4th week of class, which is stress management. So, and obviously we all know that stress management impacts all of us. So that's a very commonly selected area, and students want to know more about that. And then week 5 was a personal improvement plan. That's again where they got to apply all of these areas to their own life and be able to develop a plan to improve their lifestyle and their habits. Then week 2 was the physical assessment, and then week 3 was a dietary assessment. So next slide, please. And then we also asked students to rank each of the areas of wellness that can most lead to their success. So this was a little bit surprising. As you can see, students wanted more information on how to support their emotional wellness. And the virtual learning community does do a very nice job of that because it does have some of those other areas of support. And then they also wanted to know about physical and metacognition. And then as you see, social and financial wellness scored or ranked the least out of those 5. So next slide, please. And then we wanted to know which services students may find the most helpful to help them graduate. And so this was another little bit of a surprise that students want more on time management, which, as we have a lot of students who are working and their parents, so they definitely need to know how to manage their time effectively. So that was scored very highly, followed by financial aid and library and writing services. And next slide, please. And then finally, we asked them, was the virtual learning community successful in helping you engage socially? And 84% of our students did respond, yes, they did feel like it helped them to be more engaged and felt more of a belonging within the classroom. And then the other question here was, would they like to see the virtual learning community in more of their classes? And we were happy to see that 79% would like to see it also in more of their classes. So next slide, please. And then finally, we did ask them to provide a few of their comments on what they felt about the virtual learning community. So again, our data was collected from June of 2022 to June of 2023, and 90 students did complete the survey. Now, this was a voluntary survey. We didn't award any points or anything for it, so they took this, just voluntarily. And so you can see one of the comments here is that they enjoyed the virtual learning community and the culture of care and everything that it offered. So next point, please. And we like to see that it said that helps them to keep going within their courses. And next point. And finally, the last point, please. And this one was really nice too, because, a lot of them felt like it was helping them, that not only in their class, but as a whole throughout their life. So, and next slide, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's really interesting. And I think what's so fascinating about this data set is that we are capturing data from students who have experience at 150 other universities. So not only are we getting a glimpse of their perspective on our virtual community, we're also getting a glimpse into their experiences at other universities, many of which are our competitors. So I think it was 84% of the students said that they were socially connected. That's powerful. Next point. And you can continue with the rest of the points. 79% of the students that were surveyed, they want more VLCs into the classroom. And their most important support service that they want in order to help them graduate, time management. I mean, that's an eye-opener, especially because we have senior students taking those courses. And the most important wellness dimension needed to be a successful student, emotional support. So student grades and next course progression made solid advances after incorporating the VLC. And for recommendations, I think expanding the VLC into other courses, as well as including things such as networking opportunities, developing a LinkedIn profile, updating your resume so that you can get that promotion or new job that students are looking for. And then finally, I really encourage our leadership to consider counseling, social activities, or social related services that are going to support student emotional well-being. There is clearly a need for it, and the students are asking for it. So thank you very much. And with our remaining time, happy to entertain any questions that you may have. Thank you, Kingsley and Caitlin.
some important thoughts for myself that I think as some of you think of any questions. We did have some surprises, particularly I think as Dr. Zorn mentioned, the kind of the gem was with the students' own personal experience within the classroom themselves that they had, but also their needing information on time management. These are the kind of things that can help faculty when you're developing courses. Think about a way in which students can best manage their time within that 5 or 6 week period. But also maybe even providing more educational support for them. The virtual learning community, for example, that you might decide to create within your own program or your own department can help you maybe focus on some of these layers of wellness that we've talked about that seem to be interesting and important to the student as well. Let's see, I think we have a question there if someone wants to grab that. So please keep in mind as you start to think about this or what this looks like. I know that any one of our faculty in the Department of Health Sciences would be happy to kind of share what those virtual learning communities look like and how those are being used outside of what you see here.
We do have a question in the chat. So from Dr. Stephanie Stubbs, do you foresee this being useful for students at all levels? And here she's considering graduate and doctoral students. Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I think it would be especially beneficial for our doctoral students because that can be a very isolating journey. And it can be very challenging to get that kind of feedback and wrestle with abstract ideas. And that writing is a very isolating process. So I think having those social connections for those students would be incredibly meaningful. And I think that's something that we can work on and absolutely incorporate with our students.
As Dr. McMahon mentioned, Dr. Holmes, and he's in this presentation today, this Master's of Public Health, they use the virtual learning community and the graduate program, and they've been doing so for quite a while and keep some data on the use of that as well. So I don't know if Dr. Holmes, if you want to talk to that a bit. If you can't, if he's there.
That's okay, put him on the spot.
I'm just going to put him on the spot, but no, okay. But any other questions? Okay.
All right, well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your attendance, and we're always available if you should have questions in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, and I want to commend this group also for connecting this with the content in the course. Not only is it a great intervention for students, but it was also grounded in the content and was relevant for students in their career. But if there are no other questions, we would like to thank our panelists, Dr. Yvonne Lozano, Dr. Barb Zorn Arnold, Dr. Christy McMahon, and Dr. William Ballard. And thank you all in the audience for your participation in today's session. Please use the survey that I'll link in the chat in just a moment to nominate the TLC presentation for conference awards and share your feedback on your conference experience. We encourage you to attend the next keynote presentation, Who We Serve, Students of Open Access Institutions, which takes place at 9 a.m. Pacific Time and 12 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow, Wednesday, November 8th. Enjoy the rest of your TLC experience.